Hi, so it's 10 o'clock and we're going to call the meeting to order. And I'm just going to start out with our land acknowledgement. We begin this gathering by acknowledging and celebrating these traditional lands as a gathering place of the First Peoples and their ancestors who are entrusted to care for Mother Earth since time immemorial. We do so respecting both the land and the Indigenous people who continue to walk with us through this world. Today, the county is committed to working with Indigenous peoples and all residents to pursue a united path of reconciliation. So our first item of business is just the election of the officers. So I'm just looking right now for a nomination of chair. Warden Smith.
I'd like to nominate Ron Vanderwall.
Are there any other nominations? Seeing none, could I just get a motion to close nominations? Councillor Greenwood Spears and a seconder for that, Mr. Haig. Deputy Warden Vanderwall, do you accept that nomination? So moving on, we just now need a nomination for the vice chair. Councillor Greenwood Spears.
I nominate Fred Fowler.
And is there a seconder for that?
I'll second that.
Warden Smith. And are there any other nominations? Seeing none, could I just get a nomination, a motion to close nominations?
So moved.
So Warden Smith and Deputy Warden Vanderwall. And all those in favor? And Councillor Fowler, do you accept that nomination of vice chair?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Deputy Warden Vanderwall, I will turn the meeting over to you.
Thank you. And at this time, then we are going to move forward and we have adoption of the agenda. Is there a mover in this?
I'll move that.
Seconded by Councillor Fowler. Any comment? All in favor? Carried. Any disclosure of pecuniary interest or general nature thereof? Seeing none, adoption of the minutes. Moved by, you're gonna have to forgive me yet because Jeanette knows.
Mike is good. Mike is good.
And seconded. Oh, hold on. Leona. I can recognize your faces, but give me some time here. Any discussion on the minutes? All in favor? Carry. There are no deputation or presentations, briefing, so we'll go to the report from the Planning Advisory Committee. So welcome, Richard and Mr. Gallivan.
Morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Just quickly say that we're going to do two quick presentations on the changes to our business plan that would have been in front of you and would have been in front of County Council during the budget process. As you know, County Council made the decision to not bring another staff member on for beginning this year for the economic development, and it's resulted in a number of changes to our plan. We want to make sure that you're comfortable with the direction we're going. And then the second presentation will be myself and Sonia talking about the work we did in planning across the county last year and some of the big projects we look to work on with you over the next 2 years. And I'll turn it over to Richard. Thank you.
Thank you. And I believe there's a PowerPoint presentation associated with our briefing. So just as we wait for the clerk to get caught up here, to introduce the amendments, as Director Gallivan indicated, we went through a whole process of reports, getting ready to put this business plan together. We discussed with the committee a number of initiatives in August and October of last year, and we looked at all of it from a strategic perspective and from a responsibility perspective. But at the end of the day, it gets tough when we get down to putting our budget and figuring out what is an appropriate tax increase or tax burden to put on our community, and we leave it to the wisdom of council to make that decision. Understanding those constraints, our plan had been developed in such a way to be resourced by a team of 3 instead of a team of 2. And so we have these this business plan changes with some amendments to where we're going to focus our attention over the course of the next 4 years based on those constraints. So moving forward to the next slide, please. As I just mentioned, we went through the process of vetting our projects with the committee and having some robust discussion about what kinds of things should be brought forward to council in the budget process. We had staff approval internally on those projects and bringing it forward, and then we presented it to council in October. Most things were approved by council. However, we don't have the resources to deliver on all the things that were approved by council and in the business plan. So we had to go back to the drawing board to get things figured out so that we don't spread ourselves too thin and achieve nothing in our time as economic developers. Next slide, please. Just a little bit of background since because we've seen a lot of growth in our department since 2016. We established a charter for economic development, which was the basis of how we built our business plans ever since then. And we have a planned update for the charter to come to the committee later in the spring. We also then launched the Frontenac brand and used that brand to build connections with the business community through something we called the Ambassador Program. We did personal outreach to over 200 businesses over the course of 2.5 years, where we met and connected with businesses, learned about their operations, their challenges, and started to bring them together and connect them, not just across townships and also within to resources in the city of Kingston or in neighboring counties if necessary. But the idea was that we would be united as a business community in promoting Frontenac County as a place to do business and to live. And so because of that, we laid out 5 priorities in the Ambassador Program, and I'll speak to those in a little bit, but essentially tourism was one of those key priorities that we heard from the business community. So we started to engage in tourism, and about the same time, the Land O'Lakes Tourist Association no longer became solvent, and they ceased operations. So we began to engage in the tourism and destination development based on the gap that needed to be filled and the direction that we received from our business community from a prioritization standpoint. Another thing that came out of the Ambassador Program was the Open Farms. It's now an initiative. It's much more than an event. And it really started with a seed planted by a few local businesses that wanted to see that happen. And so we had a meeting, we engaged with them, we built it from a very grassroots standpoint where the farms helped lay out the priorities and how the events would look. And we continue to do that to this day when we go through the cycles of launching Open Farms every year. In fact, we just had our meeting with farms in late January, and it was very successful. And then we also the K&P Trail since we started developing the K&P Trail in 2009. We now have reached 75 kilometers, but since 2016 we've added 30 kilometers, so almost doubled it. We're seeing 160,000 people or uses on the trail with 80,000 unique users visiting. About 13% of those come from further than 100 kilometers away, which means that we're starting to see some of that tourism that we want to see on the KMP trail. And I can talk more about that when we talk about the trail in the subsequent report. We also have new partners. We're partners with two ATV clubs. That we didn't have that partnership, but when we started in 2016, we're connected more closely with both snowmobile clubs, and now we're starting to see events such as the KMP Century Ride, poker runs by the ATV clubs. We've also looked at trying to find ways to host other types of interpretive experiences on the trail. And so all of those things connect or pass through my desk. And that's just the management of it. That's not the development of it. And then, so in 2020, based on the growth and success of our department, we did a service delivery review, which had four main components. One, it was set some priorities. Don't try to do everything, get some clear direction on what you want to do. Or what you want to achieve. There's lots of demands and economic development. I was just at a conference with economic developers last year, and the joke is, if there's not a department for it, it ends up in economic development. And so that has been my experience every once in a while, because sometimes I end up on transit projects. The second recommendation was that we increase communication and strengthen communication between our partners at the townships, at the staff level, as well as increase our communication and partnerships with the folks at the CFDC, the Frontenac Business Services, in which we have been doing and we continue to do going forward. Another recommendation was that we start to engage in investment attraction. And the last recommendation of the service delivery review was that we move out of infrastructure management on the KMP trail and focus more on the economic development aspects and marketing aspects of the trail, which we're doing that, but we haven't necessarily moved out of the management of the trail. We just haven't had the opportunity. We've consulted with township departments. We don't have our own public works department, so there's not really an easy place to place that responsibility while maintaining the level of consistent service and quality that we provide on the trail. Next slide, please. So the ambassador program, as I said, we set 5 priorities in that program through the ambassadors. So it was we did an online survey, and then we also had those survey responses confirmed at an in-person event with the ambassadors back in probably 2018 when we set these. And so their goals were shop local, support local businesses, engage in tourism and attracting new visitors to the county, attract new businesses to the county, and improve communication between governments and the local business community. And so we've actively worked on filling that in. This program was considered our strength going into the pandemic, and one of the ways that we were able to help get information out to small businesses was the fact that we had this network, and were in all of these businesses' inboxes on a regular basis. We were able to survey them every month or two, especially in 2020 when things changed every month. We were constantly there to have our ear to the ground to understand what was going on. I would say that the foundation, the ability for us to do any of the things that they laid out as priorities, requires us to continue to maintain this community and support this community of businesses. And we had sort of tried to move away from it in response to the recommendations from the service delivery review. But it's easier and better to attract businesses when we have a group of businesses behind us supporting us. When we don't have a team of 6 professionals, when we have a group of businesses that are excited to help us bring new business to the region, it's much easier to work with the people who are already here to bring more people here. And that sort of applies to the whole piece. And so as we kind of go forward with the business plan, we want to make sure that we lean into this strength that we established and not move away from it, because I think that will help us solidify that foundation for economic development and achieve the results we want to see locally as well as going forward. We still have connections to the local business community. We email them every week. We reach out to them in terms of specific initiatives. We try to put our ambassadors in our photographs, but we haven't been engaging in as many in-person events or even like trying to engage them on the direction of our organization or get behind us on some of these initiatives. I'd say the last thing we did with ambassadors was the development of the destination development plan, where we had a number of ambassadors participate in that. So we really think that this is a strength. When we go out to other communities, they're like, oh, how do we're trying to create an ambassador or like a group of businesses or whatever. So many other communities would love to emulate what we already have here and what we've already built. And so I don't think we should continue to move away from it, but hang on to it as the foundation for doing those other things that council and the committee has set as a priority for us. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, tourism was a priority laid out by the ambassadors, and we needed to fill a gap. When we did that, we started to develop relationships with the two regional tourism organizations, RTO 9, which covers Frontenac Islands and South Frontenac, and RTO 11, which covers Central Frontenac and North Frontenac. I wish we just had one regional tourism organization. There are advantages to having two, but it's a lot of work to, they're separate organizations, separate groups of municipal partners and separate directions in terms of their marketing and programs. And so we're constantly participating in two different initiatives as a partner. And the benefit with these tourism organizations is they deliver funding programs to our businesses, to tourism businesses, training programs for our businesses, and do marketing on a regional basis for what's called Ontario's Highlands and for Southeastern Ontario. They covered most of the bill when we developed the destination development plan, about 2/3 of it, and they supported it in order for us to continue to pursue initiatives or get funding from them. They wanted us to have a plan in which that we would see that funding realized, and so that's a big part of taking a step forward as embracing tourism, but also in terms of establishing yet another foundation in terms of making sure that we're connected to the tourism infrastructure, and that when a grant program comes along, we can say, that's the plan that we have for this. It's not something I thought of on my desk because you have a grant program. And so that's ultimately what they were looking for when we developed the destination development plan. County Council approved the destination development plan in 2022. And as I've described to the committee before, one of the key recommendations was adding a person, which we deferred at the time due to the inflationary pressures that came at the end of 2022. And we're not ready to take on that person as council's provided the direction. So but that's how we got to destination development and why we got to having that proposal in front of County Council. Next slide, please. So we had to make some adjustments to the full plan, and I tried to just summarize those in the report and in this presentation in a clear way. We considered council's new strategic plan, which was approved last summer, the Charter for Economic Development as it currently stands, projects that we have a momentum on, so things are happening, that there's interest in, that we are going a direction in. So open farms, for example, is an example of that, and leveraging our strengths. Trails is one of our strengths. I know sometimes feel like we talk about trails too much, but it is something that continues to grow and benefit our communities. Some of the things that we said were going to happen are starting to happen. We see businesses investing, seeing a market on the trail, marketing to trail users, benefiting from that. We're seeing this year, unfortunately, hasn't been a great snowmobile season, but like we're seeing four-season support, and our tourism businesses all struggle to break through that cycle of seasonality, and so the trail is a good place for that. And we've also the other strengths that we have are our partners. We've really improved our relationships with the staff teams at all the townships, as well as with the folks at Frontenac Business Services. And so when we're thinking about the projects that we're working on, it's where we have partners in place that we can do more or have more meaningful impact. And ultimately, we want to make sure we're more focused on a few projects that we can make that impact in, based on the foundations that we've already laid, rather than try to achieve all of the things that we've defined as the economic development for Frontenac County. And it's not to say that if some opportunity came up, we'd ignore it. We'd have to come to this committee and discuss that. But what we want to do is focus our time and attention on what we know we can make a difference on right now, and with the resources that we have right now. And so that's where these adjustments have come from when we've developed these changes to our business plan. Next slide, please. So this is a real high level piece. These are the things that we think are the most important things. Reignite the ambassador program. I really spoke to that already, and so I'm not going to dive into it too much. But we really, what we hear from the business community, what we hear from our partners, what we hear when we go other places is how valuable this kind of program is. And we already have the foundation and connections there where they're still maintained. It's just they're not as celebrated or invested in as it could be. So that means more networking events, finding more ways to engage with them on key initiatives that affect businesses across the county, and recruiting. We just completed our business survey, and you'll get a report about that probably in March. But 10% of that survey was brand new businesses. So there were 75 responses. We had like 7.5, 8 new businesses that have only opened in the last year. And so because we now connected with them through the business survey, we can bring them in to the ambassador program, help them find other businesses to collaborate with and grow. And so we're really excited about that. I've been talking about the community improvement plan for like 1.5 to 2 years, and people are probably, but we haven't brought anything to you yet. And that's because I've been trying to do everything and getting ready to take on that additional capacity I was hoping we would get. So now it's a key high priority for us to get that done this year, so that we can see that implemented next year. Because we think that it would have the same impact as a person, maybe, in terms of doing the investment attraction piece. And it'll look very different than the community improvement programs that we have at the township level. We think those are valuable as well, but ours is oriented towards that investment attraction that we've been developing. So I think the ones that we have are well oriented to supporting business growth for existing businesses, or helping businesses sort of update where they're at, as they've existed for a while or need to grow a little bit, where ours will really be about achieving goals of council. And I'll be bringing the strategy to the committee probably in late June, or I forget we moved the meetings around that we were thinking about. Early summer, let's say early summer, whenever that meeting lands. Then based on both conversations here at the committee, conversations at council, and budget approval at council, recruitment of medical professionals is an important priority. And with no one else to do it but the economic development team, that's where we're going to spend our time for this year, based on that priority that we've heard from the budget. And we're going to bring a report about how we're going to do that. And you can agree or disagree with how much we prioritize that at the next committee meeting in late March. We're going to continue with open farms. It continues to have meaning to so many people in our region. We think we finally got to a place where we don't have to change how we do open farms on a significant level every year, and just make minor tweaks and continue to like grow the connections built between farms, people who eat, and education with our partners on open farms. And then we're going to continue with tourism, but we're only going to focus our efforts and marketing efforts on trails. And that's because we've invested so much in trails that if we're going to do any tourism at all, and we just can't do the whole gamut right now. With our resources, we'll start here. We'll lean into this because what we've been hearing is that we want to see, well, what we've put all this money and time into building trails. What's the return on investment? What's the economic impact? What's happening here? And so we need to make sure that we deliver that last mile by bringing those tourists to the trails. And now with tools like mobile data, we can now figure out who's on the trail and where they're coming from, where those tools didn't exist before. And so we can now annually be able to say, we're moving the needle here, and this is how it's going. And so that's where we'll prioritize our tourism efforts is around what we're already doing, which is trails. So it's not that hard because we're already paying attention to trails because we're still doing development and management of the infrastructure anyways. Next slide, please.
Do we have any questions or comments at this time in case somebody's saving one? Mike?
So let me understand this. We've been for the past couple of years saying we want to work tourism, encourage tourism, and focus on tourism, and expose this hidden gem of Frontenac to the outside of Ontario and Canada and the world. And council approved all the initiatives. And then staff decided, because there's no resource, to cancel all tourism focus and work on something else, right? This is what I understand as a big picture, as a headline.
So if I look at council's strategic plan, we see supporting businesses and investment attraction in the council's strategic plan. We don't see tourism or visitor attraction laid out as significantly. So while council may have approved funds for the development of a website, we don't have the capacity to do our day-to-day, build a website and strengthen tourism without giving up something else.
Okay, so why tourism? Why give up tourism? And how do you tie that with attracting new businesses, attracting investments? And how do you reconcile those two concepts of not focus on tourism, attract new business, attract investments?
I'm not sure I understand what you mean by that question.
There's a lot of focus previously was on tourism, and the trails is tourism and lots of other things. So attracting new businesses to tourism, or you're focusing on industry, for example, you want to attract new investments in industry, manufacturing. So how do you reconcile that you want to attract new businesses, attract investments, and not focus on tourism? This is part of what I don't understand as well.
For sure. So through you, Mr. Chair, so we're not stopping tourism. So, but we're not, it's not at the top of the pile, essentially. So, yeah, a lot of the investments or investors in the region are going to be tourism based, and we're going to support them. People who are looking to grow or adjust their resorts and invest in them, we're going to support them. What we can't do is maintain information on a website that's up to date and on a regular basis. We can't engage in cohesive, effective marketing campaigns. We can maintain a presence. But what we can't do is continue, and certainly we cannot continue with what is laid out in the destination development plan, where we're talking about creating more types of initiatives around sustainability, around arts and culture, building community in the way that we've been building community in the ambassador program. Now, if there's opportunities to do that within the ambassador program or other places, those priorities are still there. They're still adopted by council. We just can't, we've determined that this is the place where we were growing, and what we're hearing is that that's not the place for us to continue to grow. And so if you look at this slide, we want to remain aware of our opportunities, continue to be aware of potential for hiring additional student staff or finding a grant to help support some of our tourism efforts. But for us to do true destination development and tourism marketing, we really, without engaging in the ambassador program or stopping development on trails or eliminating open farms, we would have to we would have to have another person.
So just out of, as a businessman, in the industry, in the tourism, you think that the county will benefit more by the team focusing on recruiting a physician, which we know the chances of succeeding is very, very minimal, and devoting time and effort in something like this instead of working on a viable tourism, continuing the viable tourism thing, destination. Is this something that staff has considered and weighed and found that this is the value where the time and effort should be placed?
That's a fair point. And, you know, when we went through the budget process, both the tourism website and physician recruitment was approved. And in both cases, we had said that in order to deliver on both of those things, we would need additional human resources to do so. And so we found ourselves in a place where we couldn't make specific decisions. And based on the fact that new money was invested into the physician recruitment, we saw this as a priority for county council and for to go forward. And that's why we're here to have a conversation with you today, to make sure that our assumptions are correct and going forward.
Judy?
Thank you for the presentation so far and the dose of reality and the consequences when council failed to advance in the budget the money that was requested and that had come through this committee. To hear that we can't get something for nothing shouldn't be too shocking. And the fact that destination development and planning was approved by council and yet no money put forward to support it, I found to be inconsistent. And you know that because at budget meeting, I was the only one that voted in favor of actually investing. And as a business background, you need to know when you need to invest in bringing things forward. It's unfortunate. One thing when you were going through your presentation that maybe I misheard in that, but did you say that there were 7 to 8 new businesses or 78? It's a big difference.
7 to 8. So in that filled out the survey. So there may be a larger number of businesses, but we had approximately 75 total surveys, and 10% of those surveys were completed by brand new businesses within the last year.
Okay. And I just want to say at this point that I understand that we can't get something for nothing. And you're right that the physician section was supported by council, and that's why it is of higher value apparently than the tourism, even though 65 to 70% of all new businesses are related to tourism. We can't go back and change, but the good news is the budget is a living document. Maybe at some point council will revisit and realize that we can't get something for nothing. But thank you for your effort, and you can only do so much. I appreciate that.
Fran?
I just want to add, you have to remember the lower tier does some economic development as well. And their focus is definitely on tourism, and they often work with the county staff. So I think those committees are getting stronger than they've ever been. And I think you will see that there will be some work that will happen utilizing some of the staff time here. So I don't think we're giving up on tourism, because that is our livelihood. And there's strong business groups now that are doing much more than they ever did, thanks to the efforts of the folks in our planning department. So I think we're not in a bad situation. It would have been nice to have that extra person, but the economic time just wasn't. So we've got to make the best of it.
Vanessa? Leona, close enough. Where did I get Vanessa from?
That's fine.
Sorry. Yeah, I should have read that. Leona.
you.
I got the last name here too. in
There you
case-
go.
But
Just
go
a
ahead.
couple for me. Obviously, we know I'm passionate about marketing, and I think there's a real miss in the fact that that was not put on the table and voted. And whether you can get it at a smaller level, you're not getting that support at a larger level. So I think it's a misstep, obviously, to advance what we want to get to. So to have something for nothing is, that statement. I can't change it, but I would like to know on the recruitment side of the medical. My thing, you see it in Brockville, everybody's doing it, we're trying to get everybody there. But my concern would be, and I don't know if this is legitimate, are you recruiting for this area, and is it going to be for Frontenac residents? Or is it going to be an open? So here's a medical position, and anybody from outside of Frontenac. And the reason I ask that is, that's a weird comparison, is that they put a cell tower on Howe Island to give residents of Howe Island finally access to real internet. I say real, but let's be real, it isn't really real still. And half the people on that tower are not from Howe Island. So then we get bumped out and we don't have a place on that. So that's why I'm asking what the medical position is for that. Thanks.
And we'll be bringing a full report to the committee at the next meeting about this, because we're doing a lot of background work to make sure that we have some appropriate recommendations. That the dollars that were approved had didn't have a lot of strings attached. They were very open in terms of how we could do them, and so we want to come back and make sure we're pointed in the right direction. But ultimately, some of the things that we're looking at is about the sustainability of our clinics and our clinic model. And so what we really think, and it's, again, going back to what we're good at is this grassroots, what's local, and improving what's already here. And it may not be a immediate physician recruitment. It might be some other pieces that allow the clinics to function in a way that make them attractive for physicians to come to. Because what we're hearing is the physicians emerging from these from medical schools aren't interested in necessarily becoming sole proprietors in the same way that a lot of our existing physicians do. And I don't want to get too far off track, but that's a sense of what we're getting here. And so I think primarily our work would be done supporting local people in our local economy ultimately.
So I could add just a couple things too. Actually was told by an MPP, do not spend money on physician recruitment. It's a waste of your time. But what they are looking at, and I know that Fran just missed out on it, but they are looking at health teams. That's what they're trying to set up, because that way doctors can come and go and patients can come and go. And a doctor doesn't want to work 80 hours or 40 hours a week, but they want their time off. And so they're just going to keep infilling with doctors. I think that's what you're going to see is the new model. And he said chasing doctors with money is just a waste of time. That was his exact words to me. So I think I think we should revisit what we think we want to accomplish with that. And maybe that money isn't going to be the same way as what we thought either. The second piece I wanted to just ask Richard, and I know it's hard, do we focus on anything about open farms past South Frontenac? And don't get me wrong, South Frontenac's my home, and I know we like to focus on the city, but it must be really difficult, is it, to create an open farms not in South Frontenac then and attract people?
You're right in the fact that South Frontenac is the hub for open farms, but there's quite a bit of interest on Frontenac Islands as well, and so at the meeting we had 5 people come from Wolf Island to discuss how they might be involved in open farms, and that was a bad weather day. And the one we've had this year, so there is and there is a bit of participation in Central and North, but primarily it is a South Frontenac and potentially Frontenac Islands based piece. We have this year we have on Frontenac Islands the Canadian plowing match is taking place there, and so we're trying to align that with open farms as well. So in the city, we're partnered with Tourism Kingston and the city, but we don't see a big uptake of farms. In fact, I think some of the farms from the city that participated before learned from open farms and are doing their own thing now, and that's amazing because really what we want to be able to deliver is the capacity for farms to reach customers and community through open farms, and if they don't need open farms to do that any longer, then that gives us more capacity to support other farms.
Only other little tidbit just to follow up on Fran's, and I know that our recreation or whatever you want to call it department that puts on Bed Fest and Family Day and all those things also work with Richard too, or vice versa on open farms, and so those resources are also shared too. So.
I will just mention, and sorry, Councillor, I saw you raise your hand. Just on the subject of open farms, a big part of it is having partners. So we're excited to have partners, but it's a lot more time to create a project and deliver a project with partners, right? So and it's beneficial in the long run, but if you needed to free up staff time, not having regular meetings to coordinate with partners about who's doing what and when and how, because you're the only one and you just do it, is great. But that's if we're the only one and we just do it, we also get burnt out. So we don't. That's just something we have to factor in, because a lot of our projects, a lot of the things we used to do in isolation of everybody else. And a lot of things we do now, we engage with the community and our partners on, and that requires a little bit more administration and communication.
Fred?
Yes, speaking of farms, have you ever considered trying to attract a plowing match? That's one event that really attracts a lot of tourists.
The international plowing match. So yes, when the international plowing match came to Leeds and Grenville last year, they were doing the planning for that back in pre-pandemic, and I attended some of the planning meetings to see how we could support that or even participate in the bid. It requires a significant investment upfront by the community and by the municipalities, and there's certain commitments that have to be on the ground and certain infrastructure that has to be in place to be able to attract the international plowing match. We have a few locations that might be able to do that, but the level of support required by that event is we require another at least half of another person for part of a year. It's a significant undertaking.
If it happened, it wouldn't be him. No, it's that big. They have whole committees that go across the province to set these things up. So, okay, we better keep moving. We'll keep moving and then we'll save your question and we'll come back to it. But he's got a lot more to relate to.
Next slide, please. Well, actually, could you, sorry, I should mention, so I hate to give the impression that we're abandoning tourism, but what we're really is like not pursuing the pieces that are laid out in the destination development plan. We can't, some things that we can't do, we're going to evaluate over the course of this year. So looking at our existing website, some of it is out of date. How do we find time or processes to keep that up to date? It gets like 25% of all of the county's web traffic, but we think that's just because the ferry schedule's on there. But we have to do a little bit more analysis. So we'll come back. In the meantime, we'll maintain an update in terms of that. We'll continue to post to social media a little bit, but it's not, we won't be conducting campaigns. So we'll be present, but we will not in terms of tourism, but we will not be, we'll continue to have our relationships with the RTOs. We'll continue to pay attention to what's happening in tourism, but we're not launching any new initiatives in support of tourism at this time. So it's not a full abandonment. It's just that's not where our time will be spent in terms of pursuing new projects, at least for this year. Next slide, please. So all that being said, our Charter for Economic Development is for 8 years old. It's due for an update. We conducted some significant work around the charter as part of our CIP development project, where we engaged with businesses in the business community. We looked at all the things. And so we're going to bring a report to this committee about proposed updates to the charter for economic development, which sort of provides our department with at least a direction. But the other piece that would, I think, stem from after we've laid out economic development priorities is the need for a strategy. And Mayor Smith mentioned it earlier, that there's more economic development starting to take place at the township levels, which I embrace. I think it's great. I think it's the more support for our residents and businesses in our community, the better. But how we operate, how we communicate, how we do more together isn't laid out. There's not a clear or common structure. And it might be, there might be an opportunity for us to consider working on a joint strategy for economic development that tells us all what's responsible for. And that would include Frontenac Business Services in that. So we would say, here's our priorities and here's what happens at this level. Here's what happens here. Here's what we can commit to over the next few years. And so that's something that we'd like to pursue. And we want to have a few more conversations, at least at the staff level, before we come forward and recommend anything there to the committee. Before we pursue that, we'll talk to the committee and go forward. But I think it all stems back to, it's really hard to decide what's most important for us to spend our time on, because we have so much on our plate. And so we need to go and do more prioritization and say, this is what's important. And so that we and our community feel like we're in alignment and that our partners are in alignment. Next slide, please. So moving forward, we're planning to focus on our strengths that we've already established, collaborate whenever we can on implementation of our projects, strengthen our community connections through the ambassador program. One of the things that we're exploring is this idea of office hours. So spending more through the pandemic, our councils have changed, our staff teams have changed. we're less connected to our partners than we were before, except for the people that we have been operating with since 2016. So, and not all of those folks are still there. So we would like to spend a day a month in each township office, or nearby at least, so that staff think about us when somebody comes in the door and is like, oh, hey, well, actually, Debbie's here or Richard's here. They might be able to help you with this, and vice versa. And so that we can rebuild some of those connections that only happen when you have a co-location happening, that are just sort of Frontenac County has always kind of worked in a handshake kind of way, and we need to, and we've improved a lot over the pandemic with our ability to do things over Zoom, but I think there's still a lot of things that require being present and top of mind, and making sure that we're top of mind with our partners by hanging out with them more. And by hanging out, I mean like working on my computer in their same space as them, not working. And then I think that as I started the presentation, I think like ambassadors are the foundation for us to succeed in tourism, in destination investment attraction, knowing where small businesses need to be supported right now. And I think strengthening our engagement with the ambassadors and growing and continuing to grow the ambassador program is key. And then, as I mentioned, we should leverage our long-term investments in the trail to see the benefits that we've said would come. We need to make sure that they happen. And so that's sort of the theory of the changes we made to the plan. Any additional questions?
Judy?
Going back to the point that you raised regarding a no-name MPP that said not to focus on physicians, I assume then that you're going to bring something to the council, because that's a direction and directive with money behind it from the council regarding the focus of recruitment physician. That said, what's your alternative? Is it to focus on community health centers? Because family medicine teams usually have one site with multiple doctors, and that if we can't recruit one doctor, I don't see how a family medicine team is going to work on that. But if you have a better explanation, I'd be very interested in it. Also, I'll give you a brief update in that regarding nurse practitioner and that from the Frontenac Islands perspective, because of our ferry impacted our Frontenac doctors so poorly, they withdrew from our medical clinic. So we are actually moving forward supporting the medical committee group to designate as rural, isolated, and remote. And we're basically a 15-minute boat ride from the island to Kingston, but it turns out to an hour and a half. So we're looking for that to get funding for a nurse practitioner and hopefully hook into Frontenac doctors. Maybe that's something that can help Charlotte Lake and other places that have no physician at all and are far more isolated from any of the local communities.
We have physicians.
Through the chair, we'll bring what we think is the direction we should be heading to the committee at our next meeting. But probably in the meantime, to learn about your experience with your advocacy with your clinic, Debbie will probably reach out to you and get some background.
Any other questions for Richard? Leona?
Thank you. I just have one, it's just a nosy one basically, is do the ambassador program people who are on that pay any type of a membership fee?
No.
Thank you.
I assume the next two slides are for information, because if it went to council and it didn't get, but if I left it for the information. This was part of the budget package, but the last two slides of the package are just show the Eastern Ontario operating budgets for economic development, and where we stand in terms of that. So and it shows how many people they have on staff and what their annual budgets look like. And so that's for your information. Mike?
Just looking at the budget, I know this one, per capita, Frontenac County is spending more than other counties. Is that right?
If you break it down on a per capita basis, we are spending a little bit more than, say, Renfrew County or, sorry, not Renfrew County,
More than Renfrew.
Renfrew County. Yeah.
More than Renfrew, more than Lennox, Eddington, more than Hastings,
Mm-hmm.
less than Coatas, but more than 3 or 4 counties.
Yeah, the one thing to remember is that we're the only economic development department probably in the province that also manages trails. And that's not 5 or 10 or 20% of the department's time. It's at least 30% of the time.
I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just making an observation. On the contrary, I think it's good, and I think it should increase. I'm not saying it's wrong.
But on that point, it's not like we're not investing either, to that point. Judy?
I look at it also from the FTE perspective and that. And so for example, if you look at Hastings, that is basically 50% more people and certainly spend more, and that doesn't have them impacted in looking after trails. They've got twice as many people in their department. So that just, if you look at the FTEs, we're at the bottom of it.
Thank you. Thanks, Richard. I guess it's Mr. Caliban. Okay. Pardon? Go ahead then, if you want to.
Sorry, there's just a report item B, which is the Planning and Economic Development Advisory Committee, the changes to the 2024-2028 Economic Development Business Plan and deferral of destination marketing plans. So the resolution is that the County of Frontenac Planning and Economic Development Advisory Committee endorse the proposed changes to the 2024-2028 Economic Development Business Plan, and further that County of Frontenac Planning and Economic Development Advisory Committee recommend to County Council that implementation of the Destination Development Plan be deferred until adequate resources are available to deliver on the objectives identified in the plan. And you just need a mover and a seconder for that.
Judy and Fran, any comments or questions before they vote? All in favor? Carried. Opposed? Opposed? Yeah, okay. Carried. Now we will go to the Director of Planning and Economics, Mr. Caliban and Sonia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, Sonny and I are pleased to talk to you about some of the work we did last year to give you a sense of our workload last year, as well as where we're going in 2024 and 2025. In the next 4 to 6 weeks, I'll be going out to the 3 townships that we provide planning services on, and I'll be doing a presentation very similar to what you're going to see this morning. So I'll start and then Sonia will finish. So next slide, please, Jeanette. So we want to talk to you about the planning services agreement that we have in place with all 4 townships, go through our workload last year, and then our work plan and priorities for the next 2 years. Next, please. So the planning services agreement was signed in 2018, and I've realized that many of the county council members and many of the township council members weren't around when that was signed and may not know much about it. So I just want to talk a little bit about it because it forms the basis of our billing. And for the information of the committee, our work is 100% cost recovery. That's what county council wanted. So it's based on our entire operating budget. So our salaries, except for the position of director, where in the agreement it says that at least 15% of the director's time is in economic development. So that isn't 100% cost recovery. But the manager and the 2 community planners, as well as our operating expenses. The agreement talks about billing on what's called a 3-year average, and that's intentional because there's years where we do heavy projects at the local level. Mostly policy. So back in 2016 and 2017, I wrote the new official plan for North Frontenac, and so that the annual hours are up quite a bit. And then Central Frontenac in 2019 and 2020 did a new official plan update, and again, our hours went up. There's the Marysville plan on the islands, which takes up quite a bit of time. So any of those big projects on a year-to-year basis, we don't want the bill to go up significantly. We want it to level off, and that was the agreement that we came to. When I say we, it was the CAOs and treasurers of all 4 townships in the county putting this agreement together. Next, please. So this is the average for the last 3 years, and I've broken it down by township as well as county hours. So you can see, for example, North seems to have the most fluctuation in hours. In fact, last year, 35% decline, but even over year-to-year basis, it goes up and down. Central, pretty steady, always around 1,000 hours. And the islands, fairly steady. I will point to the fact that last year was the first time since 2020 that we had more than 50% of our hours as county hours. And that's our goal, to try to keep it at or over 50% so we can work on the big regional projects. During COVID, a number of those projects were delayed because it was all hands on deck for the development applications we were dealing with at the township level. So you can see in 2023 what the share of hours breakdown was, but then when you roll it over those 3 years on the columns, it's slightly different. And so that bottom percentage is the number, the cost of our 100% operating costs. It's the percentage of what each municipality pays. So last month, as I do every year, I wrote a memorandum to the CAOs and treasurers of North, Central, and Frontenac Islands to give them a detailed breakdown. It's very similar to what you have in our report in front of you this morning about the hours. We're trying to be as transparent as possible about the work we're doing because it's 100% cost recovery. The other thing that it's not shown here is the hours that township staff are involved in these projects, especially in North and Central. Their staff are working with us hand in hand. And so I'd also like you to reflect, and I'll say this to the township councils, that your staff are also working hard on planning. It's not just county planning stuff. There's definitely a lot of work happening at the township level as well. Next, please. So this is the total number of hours we've spent on township planning since 2016. And you see it's gone up every year until last year. It declined slightly. The biggest jump you can see is between 2019 and 2020, more than 300-hour increase. And that was the beginning of the pandemic, when everybody had an idea about what they wanted to do to their cottage, commercial ideas. We had, sometimes we jokingly call them tire kickers, people calling and saying, I want to do this. I want to build a theme park. I want to, it's interesting. And and we had a lot of development applications, a lot of consents, a lot of variances, and Sonia can give you more information on that, but it started to go down last year. And I expect it may go down even more this year with some of the efficiencies we're coming up with, which I'll talk about. But that indicates that the hours are probably never going to go back to 2016 because of the Frontenac is getting more known, quite frankly. The Economic Development Department's promoting it. The Communal Services Study, Richard was just at EDCO last week, the economic developers, and he told me a number of economic development people in Ontario know what Frontenac is doing. So things are going to get just as busy or busier, I think, in our entire region over the next 3 to 5 years. Next, please. I think I've already spoken to this. Overall decline in hours of about 12%. And almost all those hours of all 3 townships are related to development planning rather than policy, except for some of the ones I've mentioned in the report. Next, please. So this is just the volume of applications. So applications can be minor variances. They can be consents. They can also be amendments to a zoning bylaw, whether it's site specific or area, they can also be an official plan amendment. So any of those are reflected in those hours. And you can see we peaked in 2021. Look at the difference for Central Frontenac between 2020 and 2021, from 38 to 104 in 1 year, and then down to 70 last year. But yet the number of planning applications in Central are by far the highest. Next, please. So yeah, third year of decline, and those are the number of applications that went down in North and Central, a slight increase in Frontenac Islands. Is it a trend? I don't think we can say that right now, especially with, again, with communal services now in place. We may get busier, but that's subdivision work. And right now that's county related work, not necessarily township related work. And the numbers are only part of the equation. If we get a complex planning application, it can take a lot of time. And I'll give you an example. There is an application right now in North Frontenac on a highly sensitive lake, Palmerston Lake. It's a peninsula shape of land, so it's a unique parcel of land. A lot of shoreline impacts potential. There's a fish spawning ground nearby, and there's a fight between the neighbors. And there's a lot of studies going on in the background, environmental planning and so on. So that one application last year in North took over 90 hours of our staff time, and not to mention township staff time. And it's going to happen again this year. And we are expecting that because of the challenges between the neighbors, they will probably get appealed to the land tribunal. But sometimes you just have to realize these are not straightforward, but that's what we're there for, to try to keep the process on track and moving forward. Next, please. So our county hours, as I already said, went up about 13%. First time over 50% since 2020, and I hope that continues. Some of the major projects, so changes to provincial legislation. We did official plan amendments for the 3 townships we cover. We worked with South's planning team as well, so we could have consistent amendments to the plan on your official plans on the changes affecting legislation. That project alone was almost 175 hours of our time. But we deemed it to be a county project because it was improving all of the plans in the entire region. The communal services project last year, mostly my time, but also a little bit of Sonia's time, about 120 hours, I believe. I can't quite remember. And then subdivisions, over 100 hours. County council would not extend a draft plan of subdivision for development in South Frontenac that had been approved 15 years ago. The agent for the owner appealed. We had to go to a tribunal hearing. That took over 100 hours of my time just on that appeal. And that's what happens when you go to a tribunal. The good news is, under the Planning Act, you can no longer appeal subdivisions, because I think almost every subdivision in South Frontenac has been appealed over the last 10 years. That won't happen anymore. It'll be official plans, official plan amendments, zoning amendments. They can still be appealed, but subdivisions can't. Next, please.
And if I might add, under proper planning, none of them have lost.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Joe. So just looking ahead in terms of the projects that we're going to be prioritizing this year and next, the list is relatively the same from what you had seen late last year. The major change is with respect to the timing. So we do have a planning team member who over the next couple of weeks will be taking parental leave for 12 weeks. So very happy for them, but we're having to sort of rejig in terms of how we offer our services. So obviously the priority is going to be continuing dealing with the regular development inquiries and development applications as they come in. We have been successful in hiring somebody part-time for 2 days a week for up to 6 months. They'll be starting about mid-March, so we are looking forward to that to help take off some of the pressure. But on the sort of non-development policy side of things, at the regional level, I would say our top 2 priorities are the community planning permit system for waterfront development, and there is an information report about that later in the agenda. And then, so right now, we just as a again, and just to preempt maybe some questions later. So we are out with an RFP right now, a request for proposals, looking for a consultant to kickstart that. But the goal is to try and have a draft bylaw for this committee to look at by the end of the year. The other major thing that we're going to continue supporting is communal services and the new public utility board that was formed. We do have on the books the need to do a new regional natural heritage study. So our goal, again, a lot of the rest of what you see here in the list is probably going to be the second half of the year when we're back up to full staff complement. But by the end of the year, we do want to issue an RFP to start that study, as well as come back to this committee with a bit of a framework and an outline for what the update to the county official plan is going to look like. And then Richard had certainly mentioned coming back to this committee with the regional community improvement plan. So we anticipate if there's a need to update the county official plan or even township official plans from a policy perspective, that our team would be providing some support for that. So next slide, please. And then at the township level, again, we have the Charlotte Lake former school site redevelopment in Central, looking to be redeveloped on communal services. So we will be moving ahead with, I think the direction we had was a list of permitted uses for future development, as well as looking to put forward a grant application for funding for the environmental assessment. So we'll be keeping those pieces moving. South Frontenac, it has their official plan review underway. So we continue to work with the planning team there on that. We anticipate probably receiving a draft of that over the next couple of months that our team will be reviewing and helping to move that forward. The next two items are related to Frontenac Islands. There's the Marysville Design Standards and the zoning amendments. So we had a student team at Queens. They've just delivered their report to me. It's quite hefty, so I have to take a read through it. We will be sharing that with Township Council, of course, and looking to put that out for public comment. And then later on, again, probably in the second half of the year, taking that large document and distilling it into sort of a smaller manual and coming up with some zoning amendments for the zoning for the village. And then we also anticipate at some point, we know Frontenac Islands is sort of next on deck for updating their official plan. So we are waiting some direction on that, and I'm looking forward to helping them with that process. Next slide, please. And just in terms of the intangibles, again, we always have, we don't know what's coming forward in terms of the volume of planning applications, or even the complexity of the applications that we will be getting. Joe did mention some efficiencies. So I am happy to say that by the end of this month, the 3 townships that we will do the planning services for will have passed bylaws for delegated authority for undisputed consent. So the islands passed theirs last night. North Frontenac last week, I believe, and then Central, we will have that in front of the Central Township Council. I think it's been bumped to February 26th or 7th, so before the end of the month. And what that will do, similar to the process that South has had in place since the pandemic, is we still do the same fulsome review and notification, but you don't have to wait for that monthly committee of adjustment meeting. We can prepare a shorter report. We're not preparing presentation slides. So we're hoping that we can move some of those applications along in-house at a bit more timely manner, which is great for us as staff in terms of our time and therefore the costs to the townships, but it's also very good for the applicants. So anything that is straightforward will be delegated in it. And to be clear, planning staff are still working on it, the county planning staff, but the ultimate decision is made by the township clerk. So it is their decision. There's always unexpected planning issues. We even this morning, there's been some grumblings with the county planning directors of Ontario online saying, hey, have you heard about other changes coming to the Planning Act this year? So there's always rumblings. So we always have to be prepared to respond to those, as well as appeals to the Ontario Land Tribunal, always time consuming, something we always try to avoid whenever possible. But sometimes we just can't, and we have to be prepared for those. And then of course, with subdivision applications, I think again, with communal services coming online, we're going to be going to each of the townships and having a conversation about, what needs to go in your official plans from a policy perspective to deal with new subdivision proposals, particularly on how your townships want to use communal services. And as the word is getting out there that we are doing something different and something progressive, and we just don't know what to expect. I mean, we don't want to be victims of our own success, but we're just being cautious that we may open the floodgates at some point. Especially once we get the first couple through the gate, and there's been some demonstrated success with the public utility, that we may see increased applications from that. So with that, I think that is the last slide, Jeanette, and we're happy to take any questions.
Fred?
Yes, regarding the regional natural heritage study, are you making any headway with that? And the reason I ask is because the way I understand it is that the cost to the applicant is a lot more than when Mississippi Valley was looking after the waterfronts. I just, is it going to be a little cheaper or is it going to get more expensive?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. So that's actually unrelated to, so the strategy itself that we're looking at doing would be for the county as a whole, and looking at, I think, and Joe had spoken to this previously. And I think before we do the RFP, we'll probably come back and update the committee again, because some of you are new. But the way in which natural heritage is promoted by the Ministry of Natural Resources works really well, say in southwestern Ontario, where you have lots of farmland and just little pockets of wetlands and forests. And we need a different way to analyze our natural heritage, because we're gifted with so much of it, right? And I think right now we have areas that maybe we're being overly protective and don't need to be, and yet maybe there are also features that aren't receiving any protection and they should. So it's looking at the whole county as a whole in terms of what are our natural resources and how do we protect them. I think what you're speaking to was the fact that the province no longer allows the Conservation Authority to comment on natural heritage matters related to development. So we now have a contract with a consulting firm called Envision. And I believe we have the contract between us and the county, and I think each township is setting up their own independent contract. But as much as possible, we try to do things in-house, but we do have to farm it out to the consultant when natural heritage matters do arise. And the team with Envision, the reason we try to do it at a county-wide level is to get a better rate, right? And they are going to try and come up with some more regular pricing, but it will continue to be more expensive than the Conservation Authority. And unless the province reverses their decision, then unfortunately, there's nothing we can do about that, and nothing that the natural heritage strategy will change with that either, other than giving us better tools to manage when we need to send things to the consultant, perhaps. But unfortunately, there's nothing that we can do about the cost.
Judy?
I just missed something when you were going through the slides, and that on the slide with the major projects, how many hours for the provincial legislative changes did you say? 174, and then 120 you thought for the communal services, and about 100 for subdivisions plus 100 for tribunals, or just,
It was last year, it was just under 70 for that 1 year of staff time.
Okay.
Plus a legal bill as well.
okay. All right, thank you. Just regarding the conservation authorities, that there was something that came out of Roma and that with one of the speakers, and it was an interesting point that this is the Ford that only goes in reverse. So I take it as a grain of salt, because there has been quite a few reversals, and it seems that if conservation authorities can do a better job at a more efficient price, or at least a more efficient price, then maybe we'll see a reverse yet. So don't give up hope.
And the conservations had all that information to start with, where we would have to start over. Okay. There are no other questions. Do you have a?
Yes, so we just need a mover and a seconder. The resolution is that the Planning and Economic Development Advisory Committee recommend that council endorse the proposed changes to the Planning Services Business Plan as outlined in this report in the section entitled Future Projects and Time Commitments.
Do we have a mover? Leona? Phil? Seconded by Phil. Any other questions or comments? All in favor? Carry. Next we have a report on the Eastern Ontario Rail Trail Loop Market Readiness Assessment and Partnership with Ontario Highlands Tourism. Richard. For this motion? Okay. To bring this to council or this committee's attention, we need a mover and a seconder. Fran has moved it. Leona has seconded it. Any other discussion? All in favor? Oh, this is just to get it moved onto the floor. Okay. Go ahead, Richard.
I'm not planning to talk too much to the report because I've spoken enough already in this meeting, but I just want to highlight this is this is the kind of partnership that I don't think would have existed before COVID because we didn't talk on Zoom. And so we were able to connect with the tourism and economic development staff and trails teams at all these other counties and townships and municipalities to pull together this partnership all around this loop, this 350-kilometer loop. So right now we have involved in the project County of Renfrew, County of Lanark, Town of Smiths Falls, the Township of Rideau Lakes, and County of Frontenac, all under, and so we're partners supporting Ontario's Highlands in the delivery of this project. So Ontario Highlands is the tourism organization, and we sort of see this as a huge opportunity for a very unique trail tourism product that can be promoted, and the timing couldn't be any better with the Trails Conference coming to the World Trails Conference coming to Ottawa to establish a trail that can be marketed to international audiences. And the key is we need to understand what we have and what we need to do to get there. And so that's why we're pursuing the market readiness assessment. And so we've applied to the Tourism Growth Fund to support that through the leadership of Ontario's Highlands tourism organization. So what we're basically looking for is I'm not allowed to sign agreements with other organizations. So we're looking for the committee's blessing to recommend to council that we move forward with this partnership in this project.
Comments? Judy?
There seemed to be a bit of incongruence whether or not this involved waterfront trails when I was reading through this. So can you speak to that?
So this specific project doesn't include the waterfront trail. This specific project involves rail trails so the Cataraqui Trail, the Algonquin Trail, the Ottawa Valley Recreational Trail, and the KMP Trail. But what could happen when we complete this project is and why Ontario Highlands is interested in is if nobody in Ontario has really done this kind of assessment before. They do it out east on all of their trails, but the tourism organizations can then work with municipalities to help secure grants to improve trails to make them market ready. Say the tourism organization says you need to do these things to your infrastructure before we're going to invest any money marketing it, because we don't want to bring people to have a bad time. And so that's ultimately what the market readiness piece is.
Will we also be sending somebody to the World Trails Conference? And I assume that is an international conference. It's going to be in Ottawa, September 30th.
That's the plan. We're planning to have a panel presentation at that conference, and hopefully my fee will be covered if I don't. If I'm doing a presentation, that's ultimately. But later this afternoon, we're going to be speaking about. As part of the conference, we're doing we're going to bring delegates from that conference to our trails to participate. So it's a 4-day trip on the rail trail loop, where they're going to use different methods of traveling along the trail and engage in a trail assessment process. So we're going to take them through the process that we will have completed by then, but we haven't started yet, as an experiential trails development piece for these folks who are coming from all over the U.S. and there's a big trails contingent in the in Europe and as well in South America.
Do you think at that conference, the waterfront trail may be included?
I suspect that you'll see Marlene and the Waterfront Regeneration Trust at that conference talking about the Great Lakes Waterfront Trail.
Is there any negative to not doing this? No. I wouldn't think so, other than your time and the cost, whatever.
It's time, yeah. So ultimately, it's time, but I think this kind of partnership between counties is really good, and I think ultimately the benefit is we're going to see alignment. So you know how sometimes we're like debate whether we should have motorcycles on the trails, and some people do and some people don't. Some of the recommendations are then going to be to make some of this governance more consistent, so that the experience of how we communicate to the public about the trail loop across jurisdictions is more similar. There's going to always be unique factors in every community, but I think we're going to see a lot of opportunities come out of this independent assessment to strengthen our partnerships and strengthen the experience for people to travel across county borders.
I would say the younger generation knows how to find it all anyway, but if nothing else, at least it gives you visibility, exposure, that's for sure, to the area.
Wouldn't this also include such as an asset management and efficiencies? So that it will have eventually a recommendation and impact, because I don't think we operate even a toilet on our trail, correct?
Yeah. Sorry, did I miss it on the last one?
Okay.
The microphone. Yeah, so exactly. So recommendations will be about amenities or types of amenities. Ideal timing or for those amenities as part of this project. So for example, yeah, recommendations to municipalities to consider having public washrooms along the trail. These are sort of more expected in other jurisdictions, and that would make it more internationally ready. But they might recommend better, more consistent parking or types of amenities at the parking areas along the trails for us to consider. So there's certainly, yeah, asset investment that may be necessary, which hopefully then the Tourism Growth Fund is going to have a second intake in the summer. And so we're hoping to have this information so we can apply to that program to implement the recommendations that come out of this as either jointly as a partnership or individually. So that's so you're right. We're going to get a to-do list basically out of it, but some of that's also going to be around what do we have brochures? Do we have websites about the product? Should we have 4 trails with 4 different names? Should it all be one name? Should they all be part of the Trans-Canada Trail? They're going to look at all of these pieces as part of the assessment.
Anyone else have any questions? All in favor? Carried. So we'll need a mover and a seconder to bring the Planning and Economic Development KMP Trail Development Phase onto the table. Moved by Francis, second by Phil. Richard?
I apologize for the length of this motion, but it's part of it is just in case. And so if we have some trail that needs to be rehabilitated between Clarendon Station and the Mississippi River. The county now has agreements or has purchased most of the land along this 8-kilometer section. And we have the opportunity to receive some funding to support that effort. And so the only caveat of that funding and how we usually match for trail development is that we use federal dollars to match most of our grant programs, and this program is hip to that and wants us to have money that is not federal. And so it's more of a county council question about the $60,000 from reserves. But it is it's sort of a strategic piece. Since I've produced this report, I've gotten commitments from the Ottawa Valley ATV Club, the Frontenac ATV Club, the Frontenac, the Charlotte Lake Business Group, the Clarendon Station, all for letters of support and for financial commitments to the project to bring down that amount from our reserves that we might have to put into the project. So already our partners are coming to the table to help us as they have in the past, and that's really exciting. And so I'll continue to look for places for that funding. I might be able to get some from Trans-Canada Trail as well, to reduce the need for reserves, but we need to have, in order to make the application, we need to be able to have that. And we only had 4 weeks to put this together. They launched it on January 21st, and it's due on February 21st, which means that by the time county council looks at this report and recommendation on the morning of the 21st, I'll have to be prepared to press send if they're or amend and send, depending on what happens there. But this is planned development essentially, and we always try to leverage our dollars with other dollars when we undertake a project like this.
Francis?
So definitely we need to support this.
So you can see the motion there. Does anybody want it read in full? You have it in front of you. Thank you. All in favor of the supporting this? Opposed? One opposed, carried. Do you need a mover and a seconder to discuss this? Okay. So are you having any comments on this, planning and economic for the Frontenac Business Retreat and Awards? It's more for information. Does anybody have any questions on them? None? Okay.
As I went through and looked at who won awards previously and now, I noticed that since we're talking about lack of dollars for website and social media and marketing, I noticed that they're not actually doing any what's the word? Collaborative marketing back. So they don't use any tagging that says in Frontenac or Frontenac County. And I found that very strange. So it might be something just to look at with those people who are specifically winning the awards, maybe that you check in on them to see if what they're doing from a marketing perspective backwards. Reciprocal.
Anything on the community planning permit system project? Are you presenting or anything? It's just information? No questions on that? No communications, no other business? Next meeting? Francis?
Think there was a problem with April 3rd. Yes, there is a hold on that date for possible CAO interviews for myself and you and Judy. So that's probably not a good date, just in case. Unless we can leave it and deal with it as we get closer.
Would you like, Madam Clerk, anything?
I have heard nothing about that. My apologies. I'm not aware of any meetings that have been called through the clerk's office.
Well, it's just on hold right now. There's April 3rd and 4th are being held for possible interviews. So this may be fine, but it may not.
Or we could move possibly to the next week. That's still before council. The week council wouldn't be for another week after that. So I guess you'd have to look at.
Yeah, if we could move it to the 10th would work. so far.
So what do you want? Want to leave it at the 10th for now then? It doesn't sound like there's going to be 3 or 4 of us that can't come to the 3rd, so we'll leave it tentatively for the 10th, and then when everybody goes home and checks their calendar and then says, but that's what we'll leave it at, okay? If it's any different, we'll let you know.
Mr. Chair, November the 6th, be 3 of us away deer hunting.
But we'll have to wait for that. Down the road, we'll get closer to that one. Okay, any other business? Motion to adjourn? Mike, seconded by Phil. All in favor?
Just making you
Oh.
practice the names. That's why.
Well, I always use the last names, but I guess it's informal enough here. I guess I can hopefully get away with it and not get this one. Okay. Any other discussion? All in favor? Carry. Thank you.